Hello, hello. So before we moved on to eutrophication, I wanted to take a few minutes to review the cycles with you, just really briefly, because we can also talk about it during our synchronous time as well. So the water cycle, we went over all the components and phases of the water cycle. Please remember that the water cycle is always driven by the sun, okay? And then our oceans are going to be the major reservoir for water. So water is obviously going to go through the different stages as we labeled in the picture. Remember that if we were to completely remove trees through deforestation, this is going to lead to increased runoff because the trees are not there to absorb the water. And also, it will increase climate change because it would put more water vapor into the atmosphere, and water vapor is a greenhouse gas. All right, so let's look at the carbon cycle again. Now with the carbon cycle, remember that we have reservoirs that are very old. So we have fossil fuels, and then we have sedimentation, and remember this is limestone. Fossil fuels and the limestone are old reservoirs, okay? The issue with fossil fuels is we are consuming it way too quickly. And so the number one contributor is human influence or the burning of fossil fuels. Remember, carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas, so it will trap heat in the atmosphere, which therefore causes an increase in global temperatures. So remember, or I hope that you guys remember the inputs, okay, and then the outputs. And then obviously the ocean is going to be a big component to the carbon cycle as well. The ocean, remember, is the largest carbon sink. It's going to store the most amount of carbon. So carbon basically gets dissolved into the ocean as carbonate ions, and then it's used by shellfish to make their shells. All right, so human impacts on the carbon cycle, just to review, is obviously going to be combustion of fossil fuels, and the combustion of fossil fuels leads to acid rain, because that carbon dioxide will get dissolved into raindrops and fall back as acid rain. It contributes to climate change, as I've mentioned several times. And then deforestation. Deforestation, that's how you spell it. Removes a very large carbon sink in the form of trees, because trees use carbon dioxide as part of photosynthesis. All right. The nitrogen cycle. Now remember, this one was tricky because it contained a lot of big words that you guys have not seen before. So the nitrogen cycle, remember, is only stored for short periods of time. This is not like the carbon or the phosphorus cycle where those get stored for very long periods of time. This is basically used as soon as it is available. So remember, we have fixation, we have biological, and then we have lightning, and that's going to be our geochemical fixation. We have to get the nitrogen from the atmosphere into the soil, okay, and that is fixation. So remember, about 78% of the atmosphere is composed of nitrogen. Okay, so fixation occurs from nodules, the bacteria on the nodules, will convert it into ammonia. Okay, so here we have NH4, which is ammonia. Okay. Ammonia is also converted, or I'm sorry, nitrogen is also converted into ammonia through bacteria in the soil and through fungus. Okay, so both of these are ammonification, which is the production of ammonia. All right, so the ammonia that is in the soil, it gets taken up by plants through their roots, and that's called assimilation. Okay, and then animals eat it to produce DNA and proteins. Okay, DNA and proteins. Now, as I said, some plants do not like to use ammonia, so they're going to go through a process called nitrification, and these are more bacteria, so they will convert ammonia, which is NH4, to nitrate, which is NH3. So now this form is available for plants that need nitrate. Okay. Now, the next step is getting the nitrogen that is in the soil back into the air. And that process is denitrification. So here we have more bacteria. In denitrification, these bacteria convert nitrate back into atmospheric nitrogen. So nitrate, NH3, goes back into N2, which is atmospheric nitrogen. Okay. Now, nitrogen, too much nitrogen in the air can also lead to acid rain, just like with carbon dioxide. So that is definitely a human impact. It will cause a loss of biodiversity. Oh, that is not how y'all spell it. Ooh. Divery. Wow. Okay, guys. You know what I mean. Let's just start over. Bio. That's better. Loss of biodiversity. Nitrogen is a limiting nutrient. So if it's not there, plants aren't going to grow. And then it's going to cause a process called eutrophication, which I am about to explain to you guys. All right, lastly, the phosphorus cycle. Now remember, we didn't write a bunch for this. We highlighted most things. So the major reservoir for phosphorus is going to be rocks. Okay? And remember, there is no atmospheric phosphorus. It is all contained within the earth in the form of rocks. Okay? So hopefully you guys remember that basically these phosphorus sediments will settle in the ocean. They get pushed up through geologic activity to create mountains. All right. So let's look at cultural eutrophication. Now, we've established that farmers need lots of nitrogen and phosphorus for plant growth. And because they're not necessarily always available, they use fertilizers to help boost plant growth. And those fertilizers are going to contain synthetic forms of nitrogen and phosphorus. Okay? So the reason we call this cultural eutrophication is because it is man-caused. All right? As most issues we see with the environment, it is going to be man-caused. So this is also what we call anthropogenic. Okay, so anthropogenic means man-caused. All right? So what eutrophication means is a body of water that is enhanced with nitrogen and phosphorus. Okay, so let's talk about how we get these things into the water source. All right, and looking at my timer, I may have to record a little bit into a second video. All right, so let's look at this step by step. So this is basically a flow chart. So we're going to follow the pathway of nitrogen and phosphorus in ecosystems. All right, so here's our first step. Here's the farm. All right, so we know that farmers are going to boost plant growth with fertilizers. All right, so this is what we're going to add in the circle. So farmers add fertilizer to boost plant growth. All right. Now, here's the problem with using fertilizers is they are not 100% absorbed. Most of them actually aren't absorbed, and they end up in water sources. And they end up in water sources through runoff. So when it rains or when the farmer waters their crops, all of that fertilizer will end up running off of the surface and will end up in streams and rivers. So that's what this picture right here is showing you, where we have most of the issue in the United States. And as you can see, this is where we grow a lot of crops. This is the Midwest. So excess fertilizer runs off into rivers. Okay? Runs off into rivers. Now, if you look at the map, guys, and I don't know how much you know about geography, you're supposed to learn about it your freshman year, but, you know, it's okay. There's a really important river that runs right here, where all this water drains to. Does anybody remember what this is? What river is this? If you said Mississippi, you are correct. This is the Mississippi River. The Mississippi River dumps into the Gulf of Mexico. Gulf of Mexico. So I put GOM. Okay? Now, this picture is showing you all of this sedimentation that has made its way into the ocean. This is what we do not want to see. This should not be here. Okay? So right here, we have our nitrogen and phosphorus are carried to the ocean. All right? Now, we know that nitrogen and phosphorus are really important for plant growth. So then, if you look at this picture right here, this is pretty gross. This is a bunch of algae. Now, an algae is a type of plant, right? Well, if plants like nitrogen and phosphorus, it makes sense that a lot of algae is going to start to grow because there is so much nitrogen and phosphorus available. So the algae start to grow uncontrollably. So nitrogen and phosphorus are in excess and cause massive algal blooms. Okay, now I'm going to stop right here and we'll pick up in the next video.